Okay, good morning. 29 of Tishrei. Gadol Torah, greatest Torah, Hamevi Refuah, which brings healing, L'chol Chai, to all living things. Who needs a Refuah?
Baruch ben Yamin ben Rachablima. Yehudis Golda Basali Zahanan. Chaim Yaakov Zev ben Sarah. Yosef Yitzhak ben Lior. Shoshana Bas Hana. Gary Robert, son of George. Yaakov ben Hannah Miriam. Yehudi Gila Bas Lecha Rachalea. Hinda Yehudis Bas Kali.
Oh, they should all have a Refuah, Shlema B'Korev. Rav Yitzhak Fivish ben Brana Malka should have a Refuah, Shlema B'Korev. Who else? Hey, Yom Yom?
Menachem Yehuda Nisan. Menachem Yehuda Nisan ben Rezel Tzivia. And Rina Bas.
Say the last one again.
Rina Bas Rivka.
Refuah, Shlema B'Korev. Okay. 29 Tishrei. He begins with a halacha. We do recite the bracha upon seeing the rainbow. I guess that's because we're in Parshas Noach, right? You have to talk about that. We do not follow those authorities who are hesitant in this manner. The hesitancy is because the rainbow is also a reminder of the flood. But nevertheless, we say that bracha when we see a rainbow. Okay, a story. A resident of Mezebutch had a quarrel with another. Once, while in the Baal Shem Tov's shul, he shouted that he would tear the other person apart like a fish. He got angry. That's what he said. Baal Shem Tov told his pupils to hold one another's hands and to stand near him with their eyes closed. And then he placed his holy hands on the shoulders of the two disciples next to him. Suddenly, the disciples began shouting in great terror. They had seen that fellow actually dismembering his disputant. Okay, what's the moral of the story? This incident shows clearly that every potential has an effect, either in physical form or on a spiritual plane that can be perceived only with higher and more refined senses. Speech is real. Right? Speech creates, and it creates, even thought, of course, creates, and it creates in worlds behind the scenes, which is interesting because we're going to talk about light behind the scenes today, lights that you don't see, because we're on the topic of the exile of the Shekhinah, how God's presence gets modulated. Good word. It's modulated from his essence to outpourings of holiness, to outpourings of the opposite of holiness, until it gets invested in the three unclean klippas. And yet it's all godliness. But the godliness is not so apparent as is the resultant klippa and anger and the tearing apart that goes on in this world. All right, lessons in Tanya. Page 96. Left hand, top of page 96. And Akuti Amurim. Page Kuf Mem. Big letters, Vahine, in the middle of the page. Okay, and this is what we had been talking about. What we were talking about is the descent of godly light down into the klippas. And when it's in the state of ultimate descent in the Gimel Klippas Atameus, it's called Golus HaShekhinah. It is the divine presence. It is the Shekhinah, but it's the Shekhinah in a modality. In other words, the awareness of it, the presence of it, is a modality which is very hard to understand how that could possibly be from the all-good essential God, but it is. And we explained that there are two kinds of emanations of godly. Remember, light is a metaphor here for godliness, energy, godly energy. There's makif and panimi, encompassing and invested. When godliness is invested, panimi, then the thing, i.e., let's take the human, the Jew, is aware of and feels the presence of something that's driving him toward, or her, toward godly, moral, intended by Hashem behavior. And when it's not, when it's just encompassing, just enough to give the person life, it's not integrated, and it's not felt, and it's not experienced. On the contrary, what's experienced is the leftovers, or what we also call the backside of Hashem. Panim be'achar yitzartani, David Melech says in Tillim. You form the front and back with a panemius and with a backside. And the backside is one way, one metaphor that Chazal give us. We didn't make this up, and the Alter Rebbe gives it to us on the page. The backside, which is the backside of godliness. So godliness is like the electromagnetic spectrum of light. And in Panemius, it's all essence of God. In Od Milvado, at the shortest wavelength, so to speak, the wavelength that you don't see, because in the electromagnetic spectrum, there are quite a number of wavelengths, X-ray, ultraviolet, etc., that you don't see, but they're there. And that's what we're going to talk about in this relatively short piece today. Okay, let's begin. Yehine, behold, Afki Hashem Echad, even though Hashem is one, Ushmoy Echad, we put this together. Hashem Echad, Ushmoy Echad. He is one and his name is one. Meaning, now what is his name? Remember, his name is an effulgence from him. There's he and his name. So Hainu, Dibure Veruach Piv. So when we speak about his name, we're speaking out about his speech and the breath of his mouth. Hamachuna B'Zohar HaKodesh, which is called in the Holy Zohar, B'Shem Shemoi. That's called his name. So now you know what's God versus his name. Yud Ke Vav Ke is only a name of God. It's not God himself. Just like we are a being before we are named, so God is a being, and that level of being is a level of himself that exists deeper than name. Name is the attribute that we give to his speech and the breath of his mouth. That's the name. But this name, whatever the name is, Havaya, Elohim, Adonai, etc., this name is Yachid Umeyuchad. It's always singular, meaning it's singularly bound with him and one with him. Yachid Umeyuchad, singular and one. The slight difference, Yachid means there's nothing else. Yachid Miyuchad means there are two things which are bound together. So Yachid is a bit deeper. It's that place of only. Yachid would be onlyness, singleness, onlyness. And Yichud would be that stage where two big beams, let's call it Chesed and Gevurah, right? Or Chochmah and Bina. But Chesed and Gevurah, big differences between expansion outward and contraction inward. That's two opposites existing at the same time, miyuchad. Nevertheless, though there is a name, or are several names, which are expressions of God's expressions, right? Expressions of God expressing himself. Nevertheless, ha'ora, a ray of his name, and a drawing down of life force, which is drawn down from the breath of his mouth, may be blessed. That ray, right, there's him and the ray, that ray is mischalekes ledalid medreges, the ray of light. Remember, it's a metaphor, light, energy. That ray of light, that singular beam, is as it moves away from the deeper levels of Hashem to the more external levels of Hashem, it becomes divided into 4 levels. Shoines, 4 different levels. Shehein Dalit Oilams, which these 4 levels are the level of godly energetic, godly light, which is enlivening each of the 4 worlds. Abiyah, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. The Hashinui and the difference, where does the difference in quality of light come from? Machmas, 2 things. It's because of 2 things. Tzimtzumim, it's more or less contracted, right? And it's more or less misachim, and more or less covered. These are the metaphorical words to describe how the light gets modulated from one level to another. And there are many contractions and many covering and many concealments. But samsim ha'or, to contract the light, the hachayis, and the life force, ulahastiroi, and to conceal it, shelo yehei moed kol kach, that it doesn't radiate in the world of Bria, the olam of Bria, kamei ba'olam atzilus, the way it radiates in Atzilus. It has a different quality of light. Or the olam hayetzirah, where it has even different quality and lower, more simtsumim, more contractions, and more concealments. Hu al yidei simtsumim mechasim yoser. As the light, quote, descends, as it comes down, as it comes into worlds which are coarser and coarser and thicker, there are more that thickness and that coarseness is a result, or ultimately the physicality, which is the thickest of them all, is as a result of simsumim and mechasim yoser. It's a result of more and more contractions and coverings. Aval, and now this is the key point. But the original being, which we call Davar Hashem, Ruach Piv, Malchus, Shekhinah, the essence of the Shekhinah never changes. Shehi Dvar Harbaya, Ruach Piv, as we said, the Zohar calls it, his name is called the word of Hashem and the breath of his mouth, never changes. And even as it's drawn down into a ray and drawing down of life force, now this is the key point of the key point. The ha'ora of Atzilus, the original ray and quality of the ray of Atzilus, bokes hamesach, breaks through the coverings, umislabeshes bebria, and is enclosed in Bria, the original godly emanation, the original Malchus, the original Shekhinah, the clean, unadulterated Shekhinah, is transmitted as a not visible, it's not in the visible spectrum, using the metaphor of light, but is there. So if we get back, to talk about spectrum of light, this electromagnetic spectrum, if you're probably all sitting in a place with a light on now, unless you're in Eretz Yisrael, there's a light on now. And if you look at that light, you see a certain quality of light. But there are other wavelengths embedded in it. If you go back, there's infrared light, there's ultraviolet light, there's X-rays, microwaves. All of those are there, but they're not present. But they're there, and they're coming through, they're breaking through. So the essence of the Shekhinah is breaking through and being carried through all those levels. It's, as the language here is, Bakayas HaMesak, it breaks through the coverings, Umislabeshes Bebria, and is enclosed in Bria, In other words, the core, the essence, the Shekhinah, the essence of the light is coming through into all worlds, though it may not be visible in the lower worlds. It not only breaks through the light of Atzilus, that's what we're talking about, the aura of Atzilus breaks through the coverings and is enclosed in Bria, and likewise in Yetzirah, and from Yetzirah La'asiyah to the lower worlds. The Lochein, and therefore, the Or Ein Sof Baruch Hu Shebatzilus, the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light of Atzilus, he Gamkem Asiyah, is also in the world of Asiyah, and in Olam Hazeh HaChumri, in this coarse physical world. But it's there, Alidei Slapshis B'Malchus the Bia, as it's enclosed in the Malchus of the upper worlds. Mavor HaKol B'Kisvei HaRizal, as all of this is explained in the writings of the Arizal. And that's today's short, but really critical piece. Critical, why I say, to know that when you speak about Galus HaShekhinah, what are we talking about? We're talking here about the essential godly emanation, the Devar Hashem, where Hashem first comes out of himself, that level which speaks everything into creation. That level of light is present here below, although down here below, it's so covered from the layers and layers of Tzimtzumim, number one, and Sachim, and coverings, number two, that you don't see it. And so it can act out in ways that are even apparently, and only apparently, opposite. I mean, what appears is opposite to Hashem's will entirely. The Gimel Klippus HaTameas. But in them is the light of the Or himself in everything. And therefore, it can be revealed. All right, that's today's Tanya. Comments, questions? Okay, clear? Baruch Hashem.
Question, I have a question.
Oh, question. Yeah.
So what do you mean, and therefore it can be revealed?
Because it's here.
Right.
It's here, right? It's here.
Through us doing
I mean, we'll use the analogy. We are now using, I mentioned one of the frequencies of waves, of light waves that we don't see is ultraviolet. There are tools now, medical tools now, which are using ultraviolet rays to heal. They've, invented a technology. God has given us, this is an interesting way of looking at it. God has given us a technology for revealing the otherwise unrevealed godly light, and that technology is Torah and Mitzvahs. With Torah and Mitzvahs, we can reveal the godly light of the Shekhinah. We can free the Shekhinah from the embedded obscurity of Galus and bring Geula. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. That's what I was wondering. If that, like, what's
yeah,
there is that revealing moment. So it's
I think that's a cute metaphor. That we have, Torah and Mitzvahs is the technology to reveal the hidden light.
Yeah. And the other thing that I was thinking that is just having difficulty in my brain keeping both these things together is that, the Shekhinah is coming down. It's it's doing this. It's going through the Tzimtzum, but there is nothing else but Hashem. Like,
that's correct.
So even if it's doing that, there's still nothing but Hashem. There's no separation from that,
right,
to Hashem. So it's just
what you see is not what you get.
Right.
You're getting Atzmus Ein Sof. You can't get away from it. Because
we can never get away from it.
No, we can never get away from it. If we got away from it, we wouldn't exist. Nothing would exist, right? Yeah. It would all be rolled back into Atzmus, right?
Yes.
So what you see is not what you're getting. You're getting Atzmus. but it's coming through, the two words, right? Contractions and coverings. All we have to do is strip away.
I guess just that the something to keep in mind. Maybe this is a takeaway. There is only one reality, and that is that there's nothing but Hashem. Like,
I know what you mean, and I'll agree with that. But there's also a danger to that, and that danger actually came to like a head in the time of Shabtai Tzvi. You've heard of Shabtai Tzvi?
Yes.
So he took that. If you just take it at face value, there is nothing but Hashem, meaning everything is really, and it is really God. So therefore, and I know this because I read a biography of him, and this is what I'm about to say astounded me, but it just made a lot of sense. If that's the only perspective, that the only reality is God, if that's all you've got, right? The only reality, and it's true, it's a true thing because it is a paradox, that only the reality is God. So he innovated a blessing. I've mentioned this before. Oh
boy.
Blessed is Hashem who permits everything, because it's only God. It's all God, isn't it? So you've got to keep these two things in mind, which are opposite, right? On the one hand, yes, it's all God. And on the other hand, this all God and godliness goes through a process which creates clippers and shells. And those shells, we don't just say, oh, fine, let's just eat them because it's godly, right? Treif is godly. It's made from God.
Right.
You have to keep these two things together.
You could come to think, well, I guess the world doesn't exist at all.
Right.
And that's not so. It does exist because Hashem chose for it to. Yeah.
That's another fallacy which people fall into. And then I've had discussions of this with people who've learned Chassidus. That this world is just an illusion, isn't it? No. It's not an illusion, it's real. All right. Yeah, but you're right. That's the same paradox. Ayinka, your hand's up.
Yeah, I was thinking about the lights and how laser is a light, but it's used, for surgery and all sorts of different things now. But these lights, these rays, radiation, nuclear power, laser, they can be used for harm and they can be used for good.
Yeah. Nuclear is another one. It's just a wavelength of energy. A light is just a wavelength of energy. The visible light is at a certain wavelength. The invisible light are at different wavelengths. And yes, and that's a beautiful metaphor. There's a huge power in it, and that power can be used either, as you said it, for good or the opposite. And that's all we have to do is just touch it in the right way. And I say the right way is the way that's prescribed by Torah and mitzvahs.
Right, harness the light and use it.
Harness the light, and use it, because it's really powerful. It's Atzmas Elokus. I mean, one way of saying this is that everything around is essence of God in a physical form in this world, but it's there. We have the power. Why do I say that? Because it was my grandchildren were years ago with Avram Fried and a few others in his younger days. Kids have power. It's a video. You can see it. Kids have power. We have the power to change the world. That was the theme song. And these kids are just all on stage. We have the power. But it was a beautiful song. I can't. You Google it. You'll find it. Yep. That's the takeaway. That was yesterday's takeaway too, I think. But that is a takeaway of them, amongst others that I'm sure you could come up with other takeaways as well. Rosa?
Yeah, Rabbi Yossi Goldstein doesn't always get credit for this song, but he was the original one who composed the song Hashem is Here, Hashem is There. Hashem is truly everywhere.
Right.
And he was my principal in Beis Yaakov Elementary School. And I remember him saying that even though this sounds like a simple song, it really has a lot of meaning.
Uncle Yossi. Yeah. Yeah, we know him well. Baruch Hashem. Yeah. Well,
but I think that's what we're saying today.
Yeah. That is what we're saying today. Simple. The more you drill down into the simpler, the more power there's there. The nucleus, right? The small, simple thing. That's where it all resides. Go ahead.
I think that, and like, I think you could live your life and just go through an ordinary day, or you could look for different small rays of hashgacha, of how Hashem is guiding you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then Hashem is kind of more here. Yeah. For instance, I was debating yesterday to go out of my way because I didn't have so much time to drop something off. Kind of as a chesed, somebody who doesn't so much have the energy to cook, and I had some extras, some soup that I had made the day before. So would I drop it off, and then that takes away from that hour that I have to do errands. But then you have to be in New York to appreciate this. The next place I went to, I found the park right away.
Mm-hmm.
So you could just say, okay, I was lucky and I did this and I did that and make it routine. Or you could say, like, Hashem gave me back that time that it took to drop off the soup.
Right.
Because I found the park. So I could say that's a gift from God.
You bet. Well, it's all a gift from God, that's for sure. Okay, Yeshikoyach, as usual. Thank you very much for all of the richness that you guys bring to this table. And we'll see you tomorrow, Yemir Hashem. Continue the story.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.